What is something an adult told you as a kid you'll understand when you're older, that you now understand because you're older? How much high school absolutely did not matter at all. I wasn't involved in a lot of school pride type activities. I basically went to school only when I was required to, so I figured it wouldn't matter that much once it was over, but it still took me by surprise. It is also almost immediate. The last day of school was the last time I saw about 90% of my friends, and the ones I am still in contact with are only my closest friends and childhood friends. Everyone else was just gone as soon as we graduated. I want to be clear that this is not a bad thing. I think outgrowing people is very real, and meeting new people helps you grow. It's just, as someone who hated high school and knew it was not as important as it seemed, I was still blown away by how little everything mattered. The universe is not inherently just. Bad things happen to good people for no good reason. People are motivated by selfish and short-sighted interest most of the time. Just try to be the best person you can be. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and hope more people buy into that way of thinking than take advantage of it. I wasn't exactly told, but just something I grew to understand better as I got older. When I was a kid, my dad and I had a tradition every week of going to the video store and renting a movie or two to watch together. I remember I used to get really upset at him because every single time we'd actually start to watch the movie he would fall asleep. It wasn't until I was older that I realized that the reason he would fall asleep was because he was exhausted from working two very physically demanding jobs to try and give me the best life he possibly could. On top of that, even though he was tired, he still made an effort to try and start a little tradition with me and spend time with me. Those memories of me having to nudge my dad awake are so great in my eyes, because they made me realize what a caring and hard-working man he is. That I really could not try two buses to get a sugar cookie when I was 3. I knew the buses and the way and was mad that they didn't let me go alone because I had the money. Now I know if they let me they may have been arrested for negligence, but back then I wanted a goddamn cookie. The importance of saving money. We weren't rich as kids, but we were comfortable. My dad has always been cheap, and if he can save money rather than spend it he would. He also would sometimes prefer to splurge on himself occasionally rather than spoil us, which, as the primary income earner for my family, I completely understand. Now, anyway, he always stressed saving money. Even when I got my first full-time job with benefits at 23, he said to max out my 401k. I didn't understand it and thought it was stupid. Why save money for retirement if it doesn't look like anyone can ever retire nowadays? But I listened, and put a bunch of money in. Even during the Great Recession I kept pumping money in. Now I'm older, wiser, and with a 401k that's 3x higher than people my age group, I fully understand it. Now I find myself trying to instill the same ethics in my kids. And it's like talking to a wall. Kid, I did good in school this week, can I get $5 for Roblox? Me, yeah, that's your allowance. But you know you could save that $5 and then buy something bigger and tangible with it rather than blowing $5 on virtual hats. Kid, blows through $5 worth of Robux in 2 minutes, has stylish new virtual hats. Me, I have become my father. Kid, huh? Me, don't understand when you're older. Your body is not Trendle. If you're young, don't forget that you'll have to inhabit the same body in your 40s. Heavy alcohol or drug consumption will also catch up to you. Even forgetting sunblock will eventually cost you. At the very least, try to eat right. Start a skincare routine and stay hydrated. I saw 2 moths connected flying. I asked why. My father, they are trading eggs. They divide the weight evenly so it makes it easier to fly. At camp, some kids asked the camp counselor the same question. I chimed in with my newfound knowledge. The counselor even backed me up and said I was correct. The question I have is, how hard are those kids laughing at me now? I recently brought this up with my father and we had a good laugh about it. why my mom absolutely would not let me and my sister go near this fun 20-something-year-old neighbor that liked to play and roughhouse with the neighborhood kids. Years later Ray found out he'd gone to jail for molesting a 12-year-old girl 3 doors down from me. A good death. As a kid with many relatives and cousins, there was always a wedding, funeral, christening, or something going on. When my great-aunt Mimi died, I reacted to some of the elders remarking what a good death she had had, that she was so lucky. I thought it sounded kind of funny, morbid. I mean, the poor lady had died, right? Well, now in my late 50s and having watched some horrible deaths unfold, the late father-in-law who had a stroke in his 60s and lingered for years in a vegetative state, until he was shriveled to double digits in weight and had bed sores down to the bone. My own late father, also in his mid-60s and healthy as a horse, stricken with the rare and aggressive cancer that tortured him relentlessly in the final year of his life. A friend, younger than me, who wasted away from a terrible rare illness over the course of several years, finally dying in an extremely debilitated state, leaving an exhausted and bereft husband and 19-year-old daughter. On the other hand, great-aunt Mimi died in her 80s, having lived a full life and having been healthy and active to the end. A religious lady, she was out for a stroll with a friend on a sunny day, and suddenly dropped dead at the foot of the statue of the Virgin Mary. A good death, a truly great thing to wish for your own sake and for that of your family. You should choose your friends wisely. As a kid I had some fun friends that certainly weren't in my best self-interest. It seemed harmless at the time, but in hindsight I should have nipped some of those relationships in the bud. Surround yourself with people you want to emulate, because like it or not, you will emulate them. We would often walk by a store which entrance was covered by sequins and glittery curtains. I asked my stepfather why this place was, as the outside looked so beautiful, but it was impossible to see inside. He said, "It is not a place for kids." I had recently learned at that time that children are prohibited from casinos, so I replied, "Oh, it must be a casino then," to which he just said, "You'll understand when you're older." And now I understand that it was a sex shop. That kids grow up so fast. Now that my youngest just graduated high school, I am wondering how the hell this happened. Wasn't it just last year she finished elementary? Has it really been 18 years since I brought her home? My first 18 years of life seemed like one half a century. Her first 18 years feel like 5 years. My dad told me that you will need to be an asshole at times to get the point across. My mom was often a softie on phone calls with customer service, especially when it came to doctor appointments. Once, my dad finally had enough, asked her for the phone and took over for a moment to tell for shitty runarounds. He got the appointment he needed right away. I once did this one dealing with a pizza order because it was far late. Not only did I finally get the pizza order, but got a cheesecake for free afterwards. I ordered calmly, and the orders were done right. At least, on time. Edit, grammar, I was using my phone. Who's her mother and father? ? My mother would ask me that about the girls I used to bring home. Oh, and once an older guy was at a house party with us and I noticed him just staring, enjoying the moment, and he looked at me and said, "Enjoy this because once you out, it's hard to get back in." I spent a long time trying to understand that until I pulled away from friends for some personal growth, and boy was it hard to just fit in again. It's just awkward when you're not mentally on the same level anymore, but staying in is gonna cost you even more. When I was in middle school we had abstinence-only sex, and once we were actually taught what sex was, I got suckered right into it in 7th grade, signed a pledge and everything. We didn't do the rings, those were a separate thing that specifically Christian kids did if they wanted, and there was a separate group that came to churches. At the time I thought, Why marry if nothing about it is special? By 2 years later I was getting scolded in class for speaking up when the teacher said women who dress a certain way shouldn't be surprised if they get date raped. Edit, I'm naming and shaming. The group was Operation Keepsake. This was mid-2000s. When I called to report the behavior, the person running the phone called me a liar. Now that I'm in my mid-30s, I am really starting to understand what my parents sacrificed to provide the kind of life they gave me. My mom worked swing shifts while my dad worked day shifts just so there was always someone at home to care for me, feed me, take me to school and pick me back up. So they spent very little time together and even had different sleep schedules. I also better understand, and am able to make room for, their shortcomings as parents. Because at the end of the day, no one gets everything right. An approach or technique that works for one child may not work for another, and their parents got a lot wrong too, which is most of what they have to draw from and try to improve upon. We're all just doing the best we can with what we're given. The tools we have to work with aren't always the best suited for what we're trying to do, but it's exceedingly difficult to perform in a way that hasn't been modeled for us. If a child grows up in a home with parents that simply don't have the time they should have, and resort to emotional or physical violence to keep order and enforce their will, that child will use those same tools outside the home to try to get others to listen to them or to get what they want. My brothers and I fought and argued a lot when we were kids, as brothers do. And my mom would always say, "You three will be best friends when you are grown up." She was right in a way, but she failed to mention that it has less to do with us liking each other more than it is with humans liking each other less as they get older. When I was 8, my friend and our families were going on a camping trip in a van, the dads in the front, the moms in the middle, and we 2 boys in the back. I'd how it started, but at some point we got into a kind of argument over whether God existed or not. I say it's a kind of argument because it wasn't a religious debate so much as it was 2 kids going like, "Yes he does, no he doesn't." At that point I figured I'd call to my dad in the front of the car and asked him if God existed. My dad said something super vague that basically amounted to maybe, and I felt super sold out because actually I knew my dad was an atheist and was depending on him to side with me. He never said anything like "you'll understand when you're older" about this incident, but I basically figured out for myself that yeah, dads and TAQs, you kinda can't just go around telling kids that God doesn't exist. On a much less interesting note, that exact same friend was sometimes a dick, not like really bad or anything, but I would complain to mom and mom wouldn't do shit and she'd say "you'll understand when you're older." And indeed now that I'm an adult I realize that yeah, there was no way my mom could just punish another person's kid the way I wanted her to. Making your bed and keeping your room clean took me a while to get into the habit, but it just puts you in a better headspace to come home to a clean room, and getting in the habit of doing something as small as making your bed translates to bigger and better habits. Time flies. My uncle who is in his 70s said to me one day while we were in the kitchen that once you hit 30 zoom, it fast. I hit my 30 and holy hell, time is flying. I seriously sometimes I have to ask my coworkers what day it is. I didn't even notice I was starting to get smile wrinkles and also on my forehead. Oh man. You'll just have to trust me for now. I never knew how much knowledge, life experiences my parents had about so many things that they either didn't have the time to explain or I probably wouldn't understand without a school course to get it in order to agree. I understand why my parents were wiped out after a whole day at Disneyland. As a kid, I could not understand why my parents were wiped out before the sun went down. I asked them why are they so tired, to which they said, "You'll understand when you're older." I went to Disneyland this past Saturday and I totally get it. Why aunts and uncles cared so much for me when I was a kid, barely knew them, and saw them at most like 1-2 times a year. I had a vague familial love for them, but never really felt close. Now that my brothers are starting to have kids, it kills me that they've moved far out of state and I'll only be able to see them and their kids 1-2 times a year. Why my mom doesn't let us talk to our extended family. Turns out every male on my father's side and my mother's side outside of our immediate family is a pedophile or a rapist. Some towns or family is known for it and it makes me hate myself because of the people I'm related to. Boasting about what you have. My parents always got onto me as a kid because they would humble brag about things. We weren't rich or had nice things by all means, but I would get a new toy or cool shirt and boast about it. My dad always told me, if you tell people you have land, they're gonna be your friend just to hunt on it. Makes a lot of sense now. When I was 7, my dad, that clueless, sweet nerd, gave my mom a device to use on her arthritic neck for Christmas because she had a lot of pain. It was a vibrator, and it was pink and, bullet-shaped but longer. This was late 1960s, and the graphic on the box showed a woman with a beehive hairdo applying this device to her neck and looking way happier about it than she should have. This was a gift she opened on Christmas Eve, in front of the family. Mom turned beet red. My adult older sisters literally rolled on the floor, laughing. Dad looked very confused. I asked, "Why is this funny?" My sister told me, "You'll understand when you're older." I was about 16 when that memory came back and I understood why it was funny. I haven't stopped laughing yet. Why my mom would freak out if I was 10 minutes late getting home. We didn't have cell phones back then. When my kids are late getting home and they don't answer their phones, it scares the snot out of me. I start running over every possible kidnapping scenario in my mind. When I was about 7 to 8 years old, one day of the week we would go to the Scarvery, a restaurant that mostly serves Sunday food that had one of those big padded indoor play areas. After school, in the men's toilets there was a machine that dispensed packs of lemons mints, little boxes of triangular mints. Don't know if they still make them. I went to my parents and asked if I could have some money for the machine in the toilets and they both started laughing. I said they were mint and asked what was funny and they said you'll understand when you're older. To which I enthusiastically replied, in that case give me the money for the machine and I'll use them when I'm older, which left my parents, the waiter and some random other people in hysterics. The joke being that it sounded like I wanted to buy condoms instead of mints. When I was little I thought all wars were only to capture land, so I asked why people go to war when the two countries' leaders could just play chess instead. Winner of the game wins the land. Seemed very fair to me. Anyways, I was told I would understand why that wasn't possible when I was older, and now the whole idea seems silly. My parents would never let me turn on the card light when it was dark out because it was illegal. I knew this was a lie because if it was illegal then it wouldn't be built into the car. It wasn't until I was 13 that I realized it was because you wouldn't be able to see the road if the light was on. Not really an adult, but I remember crying when I was like 10 or 11 when my sister, about 15-16 at that time, would go out with the other older cousins and won't take me. Then when I was that age I realized how annoying 10-11-year-old kids were and I totally understood her ha. Saving money. I understood the concept and even had a decent understanding of interest as a teenager, but many other aspects didn't sink in until I was older. I could have been a lot more financially secure in my 20s, and even now, with some willpower as a teen, maybe could have even saved or invested in a retirement fund so I could retire a little earlier. Now I'm looking at another 30-ish years of sitting in front of this computer 9 hours a day and regretting things I didn't do 20 years ago. Why my parents divorced. I was 6 at the time, and couldn't understand that. The reason was, my father was an alcoholic, not the violent or abusive type, but the kind that gets completely wasted, and my mother was tired to pick up his mess. Yeah, kinda hard to explain it to a 6-year-old.